Hey, how's it going? This is a bit of a different video today, a bit more casual, and I kind of watch me use LLM, watch me use AI for DevOps. I just want to share with you because I've only been using this new AI. This is what I want to show you. Have you heard about Deepseek? Deepseek has come out in the last few days with a new model known as R1, and this is an incredible model because it's basically on a par with ChatGPT's O1, and they both use something called chain of thought reasoning, where the AI kind of thinks for itself. And Deepseek is also, it's kind of lower cost as well. If you have a ChatGPT subscription, I believe that you get O1, a mini version, for free, but you do have to spend credits to use the full version. Whereas with Deepseek, all you got to do is go to deepseek.com and click on Use Deepseek, and you'll be able to use this latest model, R1, completely for free like this. It's actually been open sourced as well. There are distilled versions available. People even have this running, a distilled, a miniature version with fewer parameters. They have it running even on a mobile phone, whether it's an Android or an iPhone, which is just insane, I think. But today we're on their website. You can get this through other ways, but why not just get it directly from the website itself, from the people who made this, deepseek.com. I just want to show you, when you go to the front page, it'll say use version 3 and click here. So if you were just to type something in here, this is version 3. However, there are two buttons here. The first one that's interesting is this one here. It says DeepThink R1. Now DeepThink, I haven't found any real info, but I think this is just like a kind of brand of theirs. But basically, this is the same thing as DeepSeek R1, the latest version that came out a few days ago, that has chain of thought reasoning in it, which is why it says here, use DeepSeek R1 to solve reasoning problems. And I'm going to show you how this works. But just before that, I also want to show you that you got another button here, which is a web search option. If you weren't aware already, large language models, AI, they only work up until a certain date, typically a month or two ago. And they don't see things live. They can't go out to the internet. However, there's a few options that you get, like ChatGPT has a web search, Perplexity has a web search. So Deepseek also has a web search option which you can click on here, and it will access the live internet. You could ask it what is the current Bitcoin price, and it will go out and find it and give you a fresh result. So we're not going to be using the web search, but I just wanted to show you that that's there. There's also an attachment here, and as it says there, it says this is only for text extraction. So I just thought I'd let you know that although this is multimodal, what you can't do is you can't give it an image and say what's in the image. That won't work. It's only for extracting text. But we're not going to use that today. I just wanted to let you know about that. So we're going to use Deepseek. We're going to use R1. In fact, I'm not even going to type anything in here right now. What I'm going to do is go up here to a previous chat. So let me just load that up. So here's a previous chat I made, and I was very interested. When you interview, sometimes they will ask you a question, how would you troubleshoot this problem? And talk through it, and I'll tell you more. I'll give you some assumptions. I'll give you more info as we go along. Sometimes it's a real live exercise. And what I hate about those exercises is they seem to be looking for people who they believe have some kind of innate ability to troubleshoot, which I don't agree with. It's a precious situation, and actually I don't believe it's some kind of mythical art. I believe it's actually a science. It's a process that you can learn. And I wanted to solidify this because it's not very well documented anywhere. I've made a few attempts in the past. I thought, well, why not ask this AI? So I said to it, act as an expert DevOps/SRE on-call incident investigator, and I'm a junior accompanying you, and you will guide me with your chain of thought process. Currently there are no incidents, but I want you to regale me with the detail of your general approach to incidents. So what happens with this LLM is, first of all, it will do a load of thinking, and it will show you its thinking. And you can see here it said it thought for 9 seconds, and it's actually indented it here and faded it a little bit. And you can see what it's doing. It says, okay, so the user wants me to do this and find my general approach. Well, first then I need to cover the main phases, preparation beforehand, detection, response, analysis, post-incident review. And then it goes through, and then it thinks, okay, well, here's my thought process. Now I'm going to consider each one of these. And that's what it does down here. You can see each section, prep, response, RCA, blah, blah, blah. It even talks about blame culture or something here, blameless culture. And then it says, oh, also don't forget incident classification, and I'll make sure to do it in steps. And then check myself. That's the incredible thing about this model. It's able to check itself. I'm not saying this just because I can read it here, but I've actually seen this on a video that someone said this is an ability that it was given, an ability to check itself. And I really, really like that. I think that's super powerful. I think that's incredible. So there's the thinking process, and I think if you do that, you can collapse it. And here is the response. So it says certainly blah, 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 and it goes through what it discovered here, preparation, detection. And I love what it's got here. It says, first of all, you need monitoring and observability, of course. You need runbooks, playbooks. Make sure comms channels are set up. Ideally, you're doing chaos engineering. And then there's a detection. So you've got alerts, avoid noisy ones, use SLIs, SLOs. You need to triage, which means classifying the severity, etc. Assemble a team, so this is escalation and stuff like that. You know, Tiger team, bring in experts as needed. Maybe there's a short-term fix that you can just do. And comms. This is the hardest part that tends to be done in interviews. Investigation, finding the root cause. So here's what I like about this. It says, first of all, you gather data. So ideally, you've got logs, metrics that you can check already. Because you may need to confirm. It may be you get a false alarm, right? And then you want to be testing hypotheses as you go along. And it mentions, I love how it mentions the 5 whys method, which is one of my favorite ones. But it says, keep asking why until you hit a systemic issue. E.g., why did the API fail? And there's a database timeout. Well, why did the DB timeout? Connection pool was exhausted. Well, why? Well, a new service leaked connections. And this is cool. And avoid rabbit holes. You know, and it says here, a junior pitfall is if you fixate on edge cases, stick to the most probable cause. I really like that. And then it's got some info here about resolution and what you can do after, immediate and long-term, you know, improvements, blameless retros, stuff like that, continuous improvement, a little bit of advice just for juniors, which I think is really cool. And then it says, well, would you want to dive deeper? And I did actually want to dive deeper. So I said to it, I want to focus on number 4 because this is what you get in interviews. And I also think this is the hardest skill, the one that although you can document it, you're in a pressure situation, it may not be easy, right? So I said, I want to work on investigation. I think it's the most difficult part. And I said, assume that we have no monitoring to check. What can I do with the most basic vanilla tools available? What avenue should I practically explore? And I want to know how it's thinking. What mental connections are you trying to make as you do these to help form your hypotheses? Because I was very interested in this part, the hypotheses setting. And I said, do it twice because I want to know for a Kubernetes and I want to know for a Linux server environment, which are both, you know, your most typical scenarios. It's going to be one or the other. So here we go. First of all, it goes away and it does a thought process. So let's see what it says. It goes, okay, investigation and when there's no monitoring and Kubernetes and Linux. So it goes into Kubernetes and it says obviously vanilla tools are like kubectl and checking pod logs and then it has this hierarchy which I like and it goes deployments, checking events which I agree. I think that's one of the best places to go. And then it talks about network issues and also were there any recent deployments, which also you do need to know. Was there anything recently that might have caused this? Resource constraint, blah 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 blah. And then it says Linux. And here it says system logs with journalctl, check processes, network connections, recent changes in cron jobs or dependencies packages, any configuration. Hypotheses might include resource exhaustion, application crashes, network issues, configuration. So I'm hoping that it went at that it's not live searching the internet, but I'm hoping in its corpus that it was trained on that included a lot of discussion and the things that were most frequent. I'm hoping are going to crop up here, and I think it actually did that. So. Then it says here, I need to make sure they're practical and clear, vanilla commands, logical deductions, and show some examples, and do it for Kubernetes, do it for Linux, make the communication clear, use headings, show the mental connections. So I love this. It's thinking through, and even without monitoring, the basic CLI tools can provide a lot of info, and I really want this. Blah, 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 Kubernetes, Linux. Okay, so here we go. And yeah, I really like this. So, for example, practical, and I love how it's given like a little code block to show the command. So, check the pod deployment state. Do a get pods, describe pods for looking for events and errors, get deployments, what to look for, strange pod statuses, recent image updates or config changes. Agreed. Check the logs from the pods. Mental connection, so look for repeated errors, DB timeouts, missing files. If logs are empty, the pod may not be starting. Node health, get nodes, describe node. This will allow you to test a hypothesis. If a node is not ready, then it may be the underlying VM or the host that has an issue. Resource pressure, pods being evicted or throttled. Networking as well. Get the service. Exec into the pod, and this is a good one. Obviously, get into the pod environment and try testing connectivity from there by using curl. Mental model is that the pods may be they're running but unreachable. And check these various things. Check out the rollout history. Was it something that happened there? Mental connections, hypotheses, timeline, correlation. So did it happen after a certain time? Blah 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 blah. I love it. I just love the way it's thinking. And just quickly, we'll look at Linux as well. So do a PS aux and check the processes. Do a top. Look for high CPUs, zombie processes, the logs, kernel logs, service-specific logs, general logs. And some of these may be wrong depending on the distro, but still, I think the general approach is good. Out of memory, disk and inodes. Obviously, it can happen. Exhaustion there. Network connectivity. Look at the listening ports. Socket stats, that's interesting. I haven't looked at that command in a long time. I might have a look at that. Obviously, you can do curl, etc. And yeah, some other recent changes in auth.log, and I guess I'm not sure what etc app config is. That's interesting. Don't know if it's hallucinated there or if there really is something there. Mental connections, resource exhaustion or silent fit, dependencies, permissions. Now, right now, it's showing a whole variety of things. What I really wanted to try and do is, what I don't want to do is someone, or wouldn't want a junior to do, is to just go checking everything one by one. I would like eventually to make those mental connections, but I think a lot of that can only come from muscle memory. So this is something I've also got in mind, is I don't just want a list of likely things to check. I want to develop muscle memory over time, or even I want to know which is maybe the first place to start if all things being equal, I don't really know what to do. So anyway, I said, what are the common threads as well? I like this. This is great. Start with the obvious. What changed recently? Or is there something obvious that's not running or responding? Start with that avenue to investigate. Divide and conquer. Narrow down the fault domain. So, in a similar vein, is it something obvious? Try to reproduce the failure. This is obviously something I've always been doing anyway. Leverage a process of elimination. So rule out one by one. Is it DNS? But I'll check it. Do you want to keep ruling things out one at a time? And I gave some examples here. So pods are crash loop back off. Check the logs, and you might find fail to connect to Redis, or you might do a get service, and the actual service is missing. Mental connection that the recent deployment deleted the Redis service. So that's pretty cool. Linux, an app failed to start. Check the logs using journalctl tac-u, and you might get an error. And then if you ls on that particular directory because it's mentioned in the log, then you will see that there's a file, but the app doesn't have read permissions. So it says here that a recent related to permissions, it broke access. And I like this as well. Would you like to simulate debugging a specific failure scenario in either environment? Now, I haven't done that yet, but I strongly suspect, because this model is so good, it's nothing like ChatGPT when it first came out. The reasoning is off the scale compared to what we're used to. I suspect that it is really, really good at simulating problems. And this is something that I'm going to test. I'm going to say, simulate a problem, you have got this app running, and I want you to break this. And guide me step by step, give me some hints, or I'm going to troubleshoot and I want you to give me the console output, the response, and if I get stuck I'll ask for hints. And I suspect it's probably going to be accurate, or at least for Linux. For Kubernetes I'm not sure, because the context is so big. Now this new model has a huge amount of context. The number of parameters and the number of tokens is massive. It's massive, but I still don't know if really it can simulate Kubernetes. That might be too big an ask, because Kubernetes has got a lot in the API server. Anyway, I asked it, look, if we obey the principle of prioritizing impact and probability, right, because you want to hit the things that are causing the biggest impact first, or that maybe you can get a quick win if it's something that is quite probable as an incident cause. Then I said, what should be the order of troubleshooting the different fault domains? Now, show me this for Kubernetes and Linux and explain yourself. So then it went away and it said, right, let's think for 8 seconds. It says, I want to know the order and I want to prioritize. So I need to obey that. And it says here, now I don't know if this is right, but it says in Kubernetes, it thinks most common issues are related to recent deployments. I'm not sure if that is accurate. If there's a recent change, it's a high probability cause. So check recent deployments and pod statuses, and also look at pod logs. Blah 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 blah. And if everything's okay, we'll check node health. Maybe it's to do with resource salvation. Maybe a node's down. I don't think it's going to be a node that's going to be down, but anyway, for Linux, start checking if the process is even running. Look at system logs, blah 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 blah. Okay, it's doing some thinking, and here it came up because I asked it to prioritize an order. So this is pretty cool, and it suggests a priority of order, and I love this. And it even gives key commands, which I don't think I asked it for. I asked for the explanation, and I asked for the fault domain. I asked it to prioritize, and it gave me key commands as well, which is pretty amazing. So this is like a cool checklist. You could give this to your juniors or something like that, right? And yeah, check recent deployment changes, so check the rollout history, describe the deployment, pod health, obviously get pods, check the logs, service, get service, obviously, node health, get nodes, describe nodes, etc., etc., etc. This is really, really cool, and it gave the reasoning for that. Linux, similarly, do a ps-awks, grep the processes, check the logs of journal.ctl, then start looking at CPU mem exhaustion, and then disk, and then network, and then, you know, recent config or perm changes or whatever like that, and even at that point check dependencies, start telnetting to see if they're contactable. So, and now I'm not sure about that. You could have a discussion with your team about that, you know, and it could be different for your particular environment, the order. But if you ignore the order, well, I think the order is generally not bad, and if you look at the suggestions, I think they're pretty cool. And these are things that sometimes you forget, but I do think as well, remember, it can simulate problems. I think that is possibly the most important thing after reading this, to get that muscle memory. And this is great because it's allowing you to do that. It's just like being, if you're trying to learn a language and you can't go to the country and be surrounded by that language, then you're kind of stuck. You can find a language partner in your home country, but it's not quite the same. But now these days, I believe you can start to use AI to simulate conversation in a foreign language. And similarly with this, you don't want to run up a whole load of real-life incidents to get your practice. You want to be prepared, so you can now simulate them using AI. And because this AI is so good, I think it's amazing. Here's some other tips which I like. Start with the smoking gun. So if there's something super obvious, rule out trivial things first. This is when I said, what did I say? Big impact, but also it could be something highly probable. So if there's something trivial, you might as well just check it, because it costs you nothing in terms of time to check something that's trivial. And narrow the scope, process of elimination. So it's kind of now starting to call things by different names, which is a little bit weird, but in general I like the layout. I think it's really good. And here, example scenario prioritization for Kubernetes and Linux. It's giving some examples like it did before. So what I said to it here is, I then said, look, it would appear that the process is something like this. So one, you've got a possible lead, like you're collecting data, you're making interim findings, and then what you're doing is you're repeating this iterative process of elimination and deeper diving, where you come up with a proposal and then you test that proposal down an avenue of exploration, and you know, you have a method obviously to test that hypothesis that you've come up with. And eventually you find the issue, which is either a systemic issue or a primary root cause. So I said to it, look, I've identified that this is how you're kind of broken it down. I want you to help develop my muscle memory. I want you to cite several common scenarios in this format. And it will help me to recognize a process when starting at stage 1. Yeah, sorry, I'm going to say again, I'm saying that this splitting into 4 stages will help me recognize a process at stage 1 and for multiple types of stage 1. So I should start with common symptoms as you described them, or as I describe as possible leads. So here it does, it goes away and it thinks for 9 seconds. It goes, okay, it wants me to use this format for both Kubernetes and Linux, and it's come up with some scenarios which are common for Kubernetes and for Linux. And it just reminds itself, I need to list these hypothesis testing steps. Let me structure them in a format, and blah 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 blah, and etc etc. I'm not sure what it's doing here. It's kind of repeating itself. Anyway, let's just look at it right. And here we go. And it's come up with multiple scenarios, and this is great. And I'm guessing it's gotten these from real world. People have reported these things and what they did. Maybe it just reasoned them and it knows enough about Kubernetes and Linux to really understand them. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of possible. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but the reasoning on this model is just incredible. Anyway, possible lead. Pods keep restarting. So, application crashes due to startup. Missing config. Check the logs. Describe the pod. Look for the events for the pod, e.g. config mount errors. Proposal. OOM killed because not enough resources. Describe the pod, grep for OOM, top the pod, check the limits in the manifest. If not, then go to dependency failure, etc., etc., and eventually it might find something like failed to connect to DB like this, and therefore and it was because of wrong labels. And it come up with all these different ones. Service unreachable. So hypothesis is a service is misconfigured. Then it thinks, well, if it's not that, it could be a network policy. So get the network policy. If it's not that, then check that maybe the pod's not listening on the port. Get exec into the pod and do a net stat. And eventually you find out from doing that net stat, blah blah blah. It was the wrong port. So this is just amazing. Another one, Linux server high CPU usage. This is just incredible. No space left. Check for disk space exhaustion, check for inodes, or maybe it's deleted files that are held open by processes. That's an incredible one there. Check else off, and it shows, yes, a 10 gigabyte log file was held open, and that's why it couldn't be rotated. This is super, super cool. And it lists so many examples here. It's just amazing. I could have just said to it, give me more, give me more, give me more. And I actually said at this point, make a table of these columns, symptom, root cause, deductive process. And so here it goes away. I'm going to skip the thinking here, and let's see what it comes up with. I can't actually remember. And yeah, look at this. It's like a troubleshooting table. So pods are in this state. It could be possibly this. Remember, it checked a few things. So if you look here, it's got pods and crash loop back off. And I told it, you can't see it, but I actually told it to show several for the same possible symptom that could then be checked in order. Now, it's not saying here which one to check first. I didn't ask it to do that, but what I really wanted it to do is to just say what is a hypothesis and what is the process. And this is amazing. This is amazing. For a missing, for a bad configuration, do this. For resource memory exhaustion, do this. For dependency unreachable, do this. I love this, and I don't think I've ever seen anywhere on any website troubleshooting strategies listed in this way. I think this is amazing. I think it's incredible. This is the kind of stuff you want to add to your documentation. You want to refer to yourself, but ideally you want to develop muscle memory. But just reading these things is going to help you develop your muscle memory, and then get hands-on. Let this AI give you some scenarios. Out there right now, there are examples, and here we go. Here's Linux as well, so a similar thing. there are kind of troubleshooting scenarios set up on servers that you have to pay for these services, and someone has had to painstakingly set up these ephemeral environments to do that. You don't need that anymore, in my opinion. You have the AI. The AI can do that for you. Look at this, man. This is just incredible. I think it's incredible. And I've asked it some more. I've said here, although there are commonalities, it's difficult for me as a junior working under pressure. So assume I don't have any prepared runbooks or checklists. Can you give me an approach, something that is simple and effective that I can apply pretty much every incident? It's concise, that I can probably memorize it beforehand. And hey, if you can even think of an aid memoir, I misspelled that, an aid memoir, you know, then that would be amazing. Some kind of way for me to memorize it. Now this is where it started to go a bit crazy, because I think I asked it a bit too much. And it made up this thing called starter framework. It just made this up. I'm pretty sure this doesn't exist. And it says stop, think, ask, restart, trace, eliminate, record. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is really the way to go. I did ask it to try and give me something that I could just use for every incident, and it kind of works. You know, don't go crazy. Just stop. Think in a sense of define the problem, gather intel, test it. This is the hypothesis testing, and then trace through. You know, step by step, deeper dive. Here is process of elimination. So it kind of does work. I'm not sure if you'd remember in the middle of, you know, that ask means sort of detect information, and restart means test hypotheses, and trace means follow the evidence trail. So it's pretty amazing that it came up with this framework. I love it. I'm not sure this is the right framework to use, though. It could be confusing. Yeah, starter. I mean, it's just incredible that it was able to come up with this. I think it's incredible. I said this is not really what I had in mind, but forget the aid memoir. I said what I'm really looking for is for common symptoms, as we call it. What's the next course of action? And also, if there's no obvious common symptom, what would you recommend to do in what order? So here it goes away, and I think this is the last thing I asked it to do. And it said, and it gave some examples here. So if you get, for example, a crash loop, back off, then, and it's this kind of going back to what it did earlier without me asking, but check the logs first, describe the pods next, and then check the dependencies. If it's an unreachable service, check the endpoints, test connectivity, check port mappings. If it's a node not ready, do this, etc., etc. And if there's no obvious symptom, if you want to do health checking, then do this. Check cluster components, check nodes, check pods, check the networking, check the storage. I have to validate this. I'm not sure off the top of my head if I agree with this necessarily, but it's given me a great starting point. Then if I disagree with the priority, I just need to switch these around. It did the same for Linux as well, with what it thinks are the highest. So again, some validation needs to be done, and again for the Linux, it's giving me a health check as well. I mean, I asked it for Kubernetes and Linux. With old AI, you had to really ask for one thing at a time because the context is very limited. But this thing has no problem. It's got a huge context. It has no problem at all. So, yeah, that's the end of it. I just wanted to show you that this new model, Deepseek, is just incredible. Let me just show you the front page again. And here we go. It's called Deepseek R1. If you type in, by default, it'll use the last model, V3. You got to click this button to get it to use R1, which has chain of thought reasoning, and even apart from that, may just generally be better anyway. This is the one everyone's talking about. Make sure to click that button, and so it goes blue. If you want to separately do a web search, you can also use that button. Someone said you can't do both at the same time. I haven't tried that. You could try that if you wanted to. This R1 is incredible. I hope I've convinced you that it's incredible. It's making connections, in my opinion, that a lot of human beings never even made before, because it's so good. Man, this is incredible. Check it out. Deepseek.com. It's free. You don't need credits. You can just log in with your Google ID. It's incredible. So hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you like this video, please give it a like, and I will see you again later. Thank you for getting this far with me, and now please, I hope you can check it out as well. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye bye.